Commander Zeth Corbin adjusted his tactical visor as the transport ship shuddered through atmospheric entry. The red warning lights cast an ominous glow across his weathered features, highlighting the scars that marked him as a veteran of countless campaigns across the galaxy. At 42 standard years, he had served the Hegemony Empire for over 2 decades, earning a reputation as their most reliable executioner. The briefing hologram flickered to life in front of him, displaying the face of a young human woman. Dr. Elena Vasquez, 28 years old, brilliant xenobiologist, and, according to Imperial intelligence, the most dangerous threat to galactic stability in 3 centuries. Target confirmed, came the cold voice of Admiral Thex through the comm system. Dr. Elena Vasquez has successfully created what she calls the Harmony Protocol. Our analysts confirm it could unite every species in the galaxy against Imperial rule. Zeth studied the woman's face. She had kind eyes, the sort that seemed to hold genuine compassion. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the standard white coat of a research scientist. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was capable of toppling an empire that had ruled for over 1,000 years. "Sir, the intelligence reports seem incomplete," Zeth said, his deep voice carrying a note of uncertainty that was unusual for him. "What exactly is this Harmony Protocol?" The Admiral's reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. "Details are classified, Commander. Your orders are simple: eliminate the target and destroy all research data. The human colony of New Terra must serve as an example. Total sterilization authorized." The words hit Zeth like a physical blow. Total sterilization meant killing not just Dr. Vasquez, but every human on the planet. Men, women, children, innocent civilians who had done nothing but try to build a new life among the stars. "Admiral, with respect, New Terra houses over 50,000 civilians. Surely we could extract the target and your orders are final, Commander." The Admiral's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The human species has proven too unpredictable. They must be contained before their influence spreads further. You have 6 hours once you reach the surface." The transmission cut off, leaving Zeth alone with his thoughts and the weight of impending genocide. He had carried out countless assassination missions, eliminated rebels, terrorists, and threats to Imperial security. But he had never been ordered to destroy an entire civilian population. His mind wandered to his own past, to the small farming world where he had been born before the Empire claimed it. His people had been peaceful, content to tend their crops and live simple lives. The hegemony had arrived with promises of prosperity and protection, but had instead conscripted every able-bodied adult for their endless wars of expansion. Zeth had been 15 when they took him. 27 years later, he was their most decorated killer. The transport ship settled onto the landing platform of New Terra's primary research facility with a gentle thud. Through the viewports, Zeth could see the human colony spread out before him. Unlike the sterile metal cities of the Empire, New Terra had been built to blend with the natural environment. Graceful towers of grown crystal rose from carefully tended gardens, while residential districts curved along the shoreline of a pristine blue ocean. Children played in the streets. Families tended market stalls filled with exotic fruits and vegetables. Scientists of multiple species worked side by side in laboratories that were open to the public, their research freely shared with any who wished to learn. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It was everything the Empire was not. Zeth's tactical team assembled behind him as the transport doors hissed open. 12 elite soldiers, each capable of leveling a city block. They looked to him for orders, trust absolute in their commander's judgment. "Sir?" Lieutenant Vex, his second in command, prompted. "Your orders?" Zeth hesitated, his hand hovering over his sidearm. He could give the order right now. His team would follow without question, and, within hours, New Terra would be nothing but radioactive ash. Dr. Vasquez would be dead, her research destroyed, and the Empire would remain secure for another 1,000 years. But those children playing in the streets would be dead too. "Reconnaissance first," Zeth finally said. "I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we act." The team moved through the colony with practiced stealth, their adaptive camouflage rendering them nearly invisible. Zeth observed everything: the way different species interacted without the rigid caste system of the Empire, how knowledge was shared freely rather than hoarded by the ruling class, how disputes were resolved through discussion rather than violence. They reached Dr. Vasquez's laboratory as the local sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The facility was barely guarded, just 2 human security officers who were more interested in helping visitors find their way than preventing infiltration. Through the transparent aluminum walls, Zeth could see Dr. Vasquez working late into the evening. She was alone in her lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing complex molecular structures. Every few minutes, she would pause to take notes in an old-fashioned paper notebook, a habit that seemed charmingly primitive. Zeth activated his suit's audio receptors and listened to her work. She wasn't developing weapons or planning military campaigns. Instead, she was talking softly to herself about cellular compatibility matrices and neural pathway harmonization. Her research seemed focused on healing, on finding ways to help different species communicate more effectively at a biological level. Target acquired, Lieutenant Vex reported through their private channel. Clear shot from multiple angles. Should I take it? Zeth watched Dr. Vasquez carefully adjust a microscopic sample, her face lit with the joy of discovery. She looked up suddenly, and smiled at something beyond Zeth's field of vision. A moment later, a young human child ran into the laboratory, clearly her daughter, based on the resemblance. The little girl couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She threw her arms around her mother's legs and began chattering excitedly about her day at school. Dr. Vasquez knelt down to listen, giving the child her complete attention despite the important work she had been conducting. "Mama, teacher says you're going to help all the different people understand each other better," the child said. "Like how you help me understand when I'm sad." Dr. Vasquez smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "That's right, sweetheart. Everyone in the galaxy should be able to talk to each other, to understand each other's hearts. Imagine how much better everything would be if no one ever had to fight because they couldn't understand." Zeth's breath caught in his throat. The Harmony Protocol wasn't a weapon at all. It was exactly what Dr. Vasquez had just described to her daughter, a way to break down the biological barriers that prevented different species from truly understanding one another. The Empire wasn't afraid of a weapon. They were afraid of peace. "Sir, awaiting orders," Lieutenant Vex pressed. "Window is optimal." Zeth's finger moved to his comm unit to give the order. The words were right there, formed in his mind and ready to be spoken. But, as he watched Dr. Vasquez help her daughter with homework while simultaneously reviewing research data that could transform galactic civilization, he found himself unable to speak. For 27 years, he had served the Empire without question. He had killed their enemies, conquered their worlds, and never once doubted that he was serving the greater good. The Empire brought order to chaos, they said. Structure to a universe that would otherwise tear itself apart through endless warfare. But, looking at New Terra, Seth saw proof that their propaganda was a lie. Here was a society that had achieved what the Empire claimed was impossible: genuine cooperation between species, peace without oppression, prosperity without exploitation. And he had been sent to destroy it. "Sir?" Lieutenant Vex's voice carried a note of concern now. "Orders?" Dr. Vasquez looked up from her work and gazed out the window directly at Zeth's position. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought she had detected them despite their camouflage. But her expression wasn't one of alarm, it was thoughtful, almost sad. She seemed to be looking not at him, but through him, as if she could see all the way to the Empire's heart of darkness and understood exactly what was coming. Zeth realized she knew. Somehow, Dr. Elena Vasquez knew that Imperial assassins had come for her, and she was still here, still working, still trying to complete research that could heal the galaxy. She wasn't running or hiding. She was spending what might be her last evening helping her daughter with homework and pushing forward with work that would benefit species she had never even met. In that moment, Zeth understood why the Empire feared her so much. Dr. Vasquez represented something they couldn't control or corrupt: genuine goodness, the kind that inspired others to be better than they were. "Change of plans," Zeth said quietly into his comm. "We're going in for extraction. I need to speak with the target directly." "Sir, that's not the mission profile," Lieutenant Vex protested. We're supposed to. I'm changing the mission profile, Zeth said with the authority of his rank. There may be intelligence value in interrogating the target before termination. It was a lie, and he suspected some of his team knew it. But they were soldiers, trained to follow orders even when those orders didn't make complete sense. Zeth deactivated his camouflage and walked openly toward the laboratory entrance. The security guards looked up in surprise as a fully armored Imperial commander approached their station. "Excuse me, sir," one of them said politely. "I'm afraid the laboratory is closed for the evening. Dr. Vasquez is conducting sensitive research and I'm here on Imperial business," Zeth said, displaying his credentials. "I need to speak with Dr. Vasquez immediately." The guards exchanged nervous glances but didn't attempt to stop him. They couldn't, even if they wanted to. Imperial authority superseded all local jurisdiction. Zeth entered the laboratory to find Dr. Vasquez standing calmly in the center of the room. Her daughter was nowhere to be seen. She had apparently sent the child away as soon as she realized what was happening. "Commander Corvin," she said quietly. "I've been expecting you." Zeth stopped in surprise. "You know who I am?" Dr. Vasquez gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Would you like some tea?" "I find that difficult conversations are always easier with something warm to hold." The offer was so unexpected, so genuinely kind, that Zeth found himself accepting. Dr. Vasquez moved to a small kitchen area built into one corner of the laboratory and began preparing tea with the same careful attention she had given her research. "To answer your question," she said as she worked, "I've known about you for about 3 days. One of my research colleagues has contacts in the Imperial Intelligence Network. They felt I deserved a warning. And you didn't run." Dr. Vasquez handed him a steaming mug and settled into the chair across from him. "Where would I run to, Commander? The Empire spans half the galaxy. More importantly, running would mean abandoning my work, and my work is too important for that." Zeth studied her face, searching for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. He found none. Dr. Vasquez was exactly what she appeared to be, a scientist who genuinely believed her research could make the universe a better place. "Tell me about the Harmony Protocol," he said. Dr. Vasquez's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "It's beautiful, Commander. Every species in the galaxy has evolved different brain structures, different ways of processing emotion and communication. What we interpret as aggression, others might experience as friendship. What seems like betrayal to us might be a gesture of trust to them." She gestured to the holographic displays around them. The Harmony Protocol is a series of biological modifications that would allow any species to truly understand the emotional and mental state of any other species. Not translation, actual empathy. True communication. And the Empire believes this threatens galactic stability. Dr. Vasquez's expression grew sad. The Empire's power depends on keeping species separated, on maintaining the fear and misunderstanding that makes war inevitable. If everyone could truly understand each other. She shrugged. Why would anyone choose conflict over cooperation? Zeth set down his tea mug with hands that were not quite steady. "You're talking about the end of the Empire as we know it." "I'm talking about the end of unnecessary suffering," Dr. Vasquez corrected gently. "Commander, how many worlds have you helped conquer? How many people have died because different species couldn't understand that they all wanted the same basic things: safety, prosperity, a future for their children?" The question hit home harder than Zeth had expected. He thought of his own homeworld, of his people who had died in their fields rather than submit to Imperial rule. They hadn't been rebels or terrorists. They had just been farmers who couldn't understand why their peaceful existence was considered a threat. "The Empire brought order to the galaxy," Zeth said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "The Empire brought their order to the galaxy," Dr. Vasquez replied. "But, was it the only possible order? Commander, you've seen New Terra. You've walked through our streets. Do we seem chaotic to you? Do we seem like we need Imperial rule to prevent us from destroying ourselves?" Zeth couldn't answer, because the truth was too painful. New Terra was everything the Empire claimed was impossible, a peaceful, prosperous society built on cooperation rather than dominance. My orders are to kill you, he said finally. To kill everyone on this planet and destroy all your research. Dr. Vasquez nodded calmly. I know. Will you follow those orders? It was the question Zeth had been avoiding since he first saw her working in her laboratory. The question that would define not just her fate, but his own. He looked around the laboratory, at the research that could end suffering across the galaxy, at the photos of Dr. Vasquez's daughters scattered across her desk, at the woman herself who sat calmly waiting for his decision. For the first time in 27 years of service, Commander Zeth Corbin chose mercy. # the betrayal. I can't do this, Zeth said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward slightly, her expression compassionate but not surprised. What will you do instead? Zeth activated his personal communicator, knowing his words would be recorded by Imperial intelligence. Dr. Vasquez, you're coming with me as a prisoner. Your research will be confiscated for Imperial review. He saw understanding flash across her face. It was a performance for the surveillance systems, buying them precious time before the Empire realized their plan had failed. Commander, Lieutenant Vex's voice crackled through his comm unit. Confirm prisoner status. Do we proceed with sterilization protocol? Negative, Zeth replied firmly. The target possesses information vital to Imperial security. We're extracting her for enhanced interrogation. Cancel sterilization order. There was a pause before Vex responded. Sir, Admiral Vex was specific about I'm exercising command discretion based on field intelligence, Zeth interrupted. The Admiral will understand when he sees what we've discovered. It was a dangerous gamble. Zeth was banking on his reputation and decades of loyal service to buy Dr. Vasquez enough time to complete her work or find another way to preserve it. Dr. Vasquez stood gracefully and extended her hands toward him. I suppose you'll need to restrain me to make this look convincing. Zeth hesitated, then pulled out a pair of energy shackles. The devices were designed to look menacing while causing no actual harm, but they would register properly on his team's sensors. I'm sorry, he murmured as he secured them around her wrists. Don't be, she replied softly. You're saving 50,000 lives. What's a little discomfort compared to that? As they walked toward the laboratory exit, Dr. Vasquez spoke in a low voice that wouldn't carry to his team's audio sensors. Commander, there's something you should know. The Harmony Protocol isn't just theoretical. I've already begun testing it. Zeth's step faltered slightly. What do you mean? 3 volunteers from different species underwent the initial treatment 6 months ago. A human, a Zolithian, and a Mordak. The results were extraordinary. They emerged from the laboratory to find Zeth's team waiting in formation. The soldiers immediately snapped to attention as their commander approached with his prisoner. Sir, Lieutenant Vex reported, long-range sensors detect an Imperial dreadnought approaching the system. ETA approximately 8 hours. Zeth's blood ran cold. Admiral Vex wasn't taking any chances. The dreadnought carried enough firepower to reduce New Terra to molten slag from orbit, regardless of whether Zeth completed his mission. Understood, he said, maintaining his composure despite the growing panic in his chest. Prep the transport. We're leaving immediately. As his team moved to comply, Dr. Vasquez continued speaking in whispers. The 3 volunteers developed the ability to sense each other's emotional states across vast distances. Not telepathy exactly, but something close to it. They could feel what the others felt, understand their deepest motivations. And? Zeth prompted, leading her toward the transport ship. They couldn't fight each other anymore. It became physically impossible. When one felt pain, they all felt it. When one experienced joy, it lifted all of them. Commander, imagine if every soldier in the galaxy underwent this treatment. How could wars continue if every act of violence caused the attacker to feel their victims suffering? Zeth understood now why the Empire was so terrified. The Harmony Protocol didn't just threaten their political power, it threatened the very concept of organized violence that their civilization was built upon. They boarded the transport ship, and Zeth's team efficiently secured Dr. Vasquez in the prisoner compartment. As the ship lifted off from New Terra's surface, Zeth watched the beautiful colony shrink below them and wondered if he was watching the last few hours of its existence. Commander, Lieutenant Vex approached him as they reached orbit. "I'm receiving priority transmission from Admiral Vex. He wants to speak with you immediately." Zeth nodded grimly and made his way to the secure communication chamber. The Admiral's reptilian face appeared on the holographic display moments later, his expression unreadable. "Commander Corbin," Admiral Vex said without preamble. "Explain why New Terra still exists." "Sir, the target possessed information critical to Imperial security. I made the tactical decision to extract her for detailed interrogation rather than proceed with immediate termination." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "What information?" Zeth had prepared for this question, but he still felt sweat beading on his forehead. Dr. Vasquez claims to have successfully tested her protocol on willing subjects. If true, we need to understand the full extent of the threat before we can properly counter it. Interesting. Admiral Vex leaned back in his chair. "And you believe her claims are credible?" "I believe they require investigation before we proceed with irreversible actions." There was a long pause as the Admiral considered this. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well, Commander. Bring Dr. Vasquez to Imperial Command for enhanced interrogation. But, understand this, if her information proves worthless, you will personally oversee the sterilization of New Terra." "Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." The transmission ended, leaving Zeth alone with the weight of his deception. He had bought New Terra perhaps 48 hours before the Admiral's patience ran out. It wasn't enough time to evacuate 50,000 people, and even if it were, where could they go that the Empire wouldn't follow? He made his way to the prisoner compartment, where Dr. Vasquez sat calmly reading a datapad. She looked up as he entered, and he was struck again by the complete absence of fear in her expression. "How long do we have?" she asked simply. 2 days, maybe less." Zeth sat down across from her. "Dr. Vasquez, is there any way to accelerate your research?" "Any way to complete the protocol before Elena," she interrupted gently. "Please, call me Elena. And, to answer your question, the protocol is already complete. The question is how to distribute it." Zeth stared at her. "Complete? But, you said you were still working." "I was working on improving the delivery mechanism," Elena explained. "The treatment requires complex genetic modifications that currently take weeks to implement. But, last night, I finally solved the problem." She activated her datapad and showed him a complex molecular structure. "This is a retroviral vector that can carry the necessary modifications through atmospheric dispersal. A single release could treat an entire planet's population within hours." "And, you have this virus?" Elena's smile was sad but determined. "I synthesized the final batch 3 days ago, right after I learned about your mission. It's hidden in my laboratory, encrypted and protected by multiple security measures." Zeth felt a spark of hope, quickly followed by crushing reality. Even if we could get back to New Terra and release it, the Empire would just develop countermeasures. They'd find a way to reverse the effects or eliminate anyone who had been treated. "Not if it spread faster than they could contain it," Elena said quietly. "Commander, the retroviral vector I've developed doesn't just carry the Harmony protocol. It's designed to replicate and spread through simple atmospheric contact. Not enough to cause infection or harm, but enough to carry the genetic modifications from person to person." Zeth's mind raced as he grasped the implications. "You're talking about a chain reaction. Once started, it would spread across trade routes, through space stations, to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Within 6 months, every sentient being in the galaxy would carry the modifications," Elena confirmed. "They could still choose whether to activate the protocol or not. The changes remain dormant until consciously triggered, but the capability would be universal. And if enough people chose to activate it, the Empire's ability to maintain control through fear and violence would simply evaporate," Elena finished. "But, Commander, I need to be clear about something. Once this process begins, it can't be stopped or reversed. It would fundamentally change what it means to be a sentient being in this galaxy. Zeth stood and began pacing the small compartment. The magnitude of what Elena was proposing was staggering. Not just the end of the Empire, but the potential transformation of galactic civilization itself. "The 3 volunteers you mentioned," he said suddenly. "Where are they now?" Elena's expression grew troubled. "That's complicated. When Admiral Thex's agents discovered my research, they also learned about the test subjects. 2 of them were captured 6 days ago. And the third? Marcus Chen, the human volunteer. He escaped and has been trying to reach me ever since." "But, Commander, this is where things become truly extraordinary. Even separated by thousands of light years and imprisoned in psychic dampening cells, the 3 volunteers maintain their connection. Marcus can still sense their emotional states." Zeth stopped pacing. "Are you saying the effect works across interstellar distances?" "It appears that once the neural pathways are established, physical proximity becomes irrelevant. Marcus has been feeding me intelligence about Imperial security measures through our connection. That's how I knew exactly when you would arrive and what your orders were." The implications were breathtaking. If the Harmony Protocol could create permanent empathic links across any distance, it would make Imperial intelligence networks obsolete. Secret operations would become impossible when every agent could feel the emotions of their targets. "Elena," Zeth said slowly, "if what you're describing is true, if the protocol really works as you claim, why haven't you already released it?" Elena's composure finally cracked slightly, and Zeth saw the weight of the decision she carried. "Because once I do, there's no going back. Not just for the Empire, but for everyone. I would be making a choice for every sentient being in the galaxy without their consent. And if you don't? Then, the Empire continues its expansion until every independent world is conquered or destroyed. More species enslaved, more cultures erased. The cycle of violence continues for another 1,000 years." Zeth understood now why Elena had seemed so calm when facing death. She wasn't just weighing her own life against her principles, she was carrying the burden of deciding the future of galactic civilization. A soft chime indicated they were approaching the Imperial command station. In a few hours, Elena would be in the hands of Imperial interrogators who would extract every detail of her research before executing her and sterilizing New Terra. Unless he acted first. "Elena," Zeth said quietly, "if you had the chance to return to New Terra and release the protocol, would you do it?" She met his eyes steadily. "Yes. The galaxy deserves a chance to choose peace over violence, understanding over fear. Even if that choice transforms us into something we've never been before." Zeth nodded slowly. The decision crystallized in his mind with startling clarity. For 27 years, he had served an empire built on conquest and oppression. He had told himself it was necessary, that order required strength, that peace could only be maintained through the threat of violence. But Elena had shown him another way. New Terra proved that cooperation was possible, that different species could work together without coercion or threat. The Harmony Protocol offered the chance to extend that possibility across the entire galaxy. The Empire called it a threat to civilization. Elena called it civilization's greatest hope. Zeth activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is Commander Corvin. Report to the briefing room immediately." As his team assembled, Zeth reviewed his options one final time. What he was about to do would make him a traitor to the Empire he had served his entire adult life. There would be no going back, no chance for redemption or forgiveness. But, when he thought of Elena's daughter playing in the streets of New Terra, of the children who would grow up in a galaxy where understanding replaced hatred, he knew he had already made his choice. The time for mercy was over. Now it was time for revolution. #The revolution. Zeth stood before his assembled team in the briefing room, looking into the faces of soldiers who had followed him through countless battles. These men and women had trusted him with their lives, believing that he would lead them in service of a just cause. Now he was about to ask them to commit treason. "What I'm about to tell you," Zeth began carefully, "will fundamentally change how you view our mission and the empire we serve." Lieutenant Vex shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, is this about the prisoner? Has she provided intelligence that changes our operational parameters?" "In a way, yes. Zeth activated the briefing room's holographic display, showing images of new Terra that his suit's cameras had recorded. Look at these images carefully. What do you see? Sergeant Cray, a grizzled veteran of the Outer Rim campaigns, spoke up first. Looks peaceful, sir. Prosperous. Different species working together. Exactly. Zeth switched to images of imperial worlds, the rigid hierarchies, the segregated districts, the massive military installations overshadowing residential areas. Now compare that to what we're used to seeing. The contrast was stark. Where imperial worlds showed order maintained through force and surveillance, New Terra showed genuine cooperation and shared prosperity. Sir, Lieutenant Vex said slowly, what are you getting at? Zeth took a deep breath. The Empire sent us here to destroy a woman whose only crime was developing a way for different species to understand each other better. We were ordered to commit genocide against 50,000 civilians to prevent the spread of empathy and compassion. The silence that followed was deafening. Zeth could see his team struggling to process what he had told them, fighting against decades of conditioning and indoctrination. Dr. Vasquez isn't a terrorist or a rebel, Zeth continued. She's a scientist who discovered how to end the biological barriers that make war inevitable between species. The Empire wants to kill her because peaceful coexistence would threaten their power structure. Specialist Torres, the youngest member of the team, raised her hand tentatively. Sir, are you saying our orders were wrong? I'm saying our orders were to commit mass murder to preserve a system built on oppression and fear, Zeth replied bluntly. And I'm asking each of you to decide whether you can follow those orders. Lieutenant Vex stood up abruptly. Commander, this is sedition. We took oaths to serve the Empire regardless of our personal feelings about policy decisions. Did we take oaths to serve justice, Zeth asked, or did we take oaths to serve whoever happens to hold power? The question hung in the air as his team grappled with concepts they had never been encouraged to consider. For soldiers raised in the imperial system, the idea of questioning orders was almost incomprehensible. Sergeant Cray cleared his throat. Sir, I've fought in 17 campaigns. Seen what happens when different species try to share territory. Blood and chaos every time. Maybe the Empire's way isn't perfect, but at least it keeps the peace. Does it? Zeth challenged. Sergeant, how many of those 17 campaigns were fought against species that attacked Imperial territory first, and how many were fought against planets that simply refused to submit to Imperial rule? Cray's weathered face grew troubled as he considered the question. Most of them were planetary conquest missions, sir. But, the Empire said those worlds were threats to galactic stability. What if the Empire was wrong? What if those worlds were only threats to Imperial expansion? Zeth switched the display to show footage from Elena's laboratory, including audio of her conversation with her daughter. Listen to Dr. Vasquez explain her research to a 7-year-old child. The team watched in silence as Elena talked about helping people understand each other's hearts, about ending the need for violence through genuine communication. When the recording finished, several of his soldiers were visibly shaken. Sir, Specialist Torres said quietly, my home planet was conquered when I was 6. The Empire said it was necessary to prevent civil war between the native population and human settlers. But they were getting along fine before Imperial forces arrived. Other team members began sharing similar stories. Worlds destroyed not because they were chaotic, but because their peace existed outside Imperial control. Families separated not for security reasons, but to break cultural bonds that might threaten Imperial authority. Lieutenant Vex remained standing, his expression torn between duty and dawning realization. Even if you're right, Commander, what can we do? We're 12 soldiers against an empire that spans half the galaxy. Zeth smiled grimly. We're going to give Dr. Vasquez the chance to change everything. He outlined the plan that had been forming in his mind since Elena revealed the true scope of her research. They would return to New Terra under the pretense of retrieving additional intelligence from Elena's laboratory. Once there, they would help her release the Harmony Protocol virus into the planet's atmosphere. The virus will spread naturally through interplanetary commerce, Zeth explained. Within months, it will reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. People will have the choice to activate the protocol or not, but the capability will be universal. And if the Empire tries to stop it? Sergeant Cray asked. How do you stop something that spreads through simple atmospheric contact? By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late. The virus will already be on Imperial Command Station, on their homeworlds, in the fleets themselves. Lieutenant Vex sat down heavily. You're talking about the end of everything we've known. I'm talking about the beginning of something better, Seth replied. But I won't order any of you to follow me. This is a choice each person has to make for themselves. One by one, his team members made their decisions. Specialist Torres volunteered immediately, saying she wanted her children to grow up in Elena's galaxy rather than the Empire's. Sergeant Cray took longer, but eventually nodded his acceptance, muttering something about being tired of killing farmers and calling them rebels. In the end, only Lieutenant Vex refused to join the mission. I can't do it, sir. I understand your reasoning, but I swore an oath. I won't break it. Zeth nodded respectfully. I understand, Lieutenant. You'll be confined to quarters for the remainder of the mission, but you won't be harmed. As Vex was escorted away, Zeth felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders in a new way. For the first time in his military career, he was leading troops who had chosen to follow him based on shared principles rather than military hierarchy. The transport ship changed course, heading back toward New Terra. Zeth had sent a coded message to Admiral Thax, claiming that Dr. Vasquez had revealed the existence of additional research facilities that needed to be investigated before sterilization could proceed. It bought them perhaps 18 hours before the Admiral grew suspicious. As they approached New Terra's atmosphere, Zeth made his way to the prisoner compartment where Elena waited. She looked up as he entered, and he saw that she already understood what he had decided. Your team agreed to help, she asked. Most of them. The ones who matter. Zeth began unfastening her restraints. Elena, I need you to understand something. Once we do this, there's no going back. Not just for the Empire, but for all of us. We'll be fugitives for the rest of our lives. Elena rubbed her wrists as the shackles fell away. Commander, do you have children? No. Never had the chance. Military life doesn't allow for much family time. I do. A daughter named Maria. She's 7 years old, brilliant and kind and everything good about humanity. Elena stood and walked to the viewport, looking down at New Terra's surface. When I watch her playing with her friends, human children, Zilithian children, Mordak children, I see what the galaxy could be. What it should be. She turned back to Zeth. I would die 1,000 times to give her that future. But, more than that, I would live as a fugitive forever to make it possible. The transport settled onto New Terra's surface just as the local sun was rising. Zeth's team moved through the colony with new eyes, no longer seeing targets to be eliminated but people to be protected. Children who deserved to grow up in peace, families who had built something beautiful in defiance of Imperial doctrine. They reached Elena's laboratory without incident. The building seemed empty, but, as they approached the entrance, 3 figures emerged from concealment. Zeth's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon before Elena called out in recognition. Marcus! How did you get here so fast? The man who approached was tall and lean, with prematurely gray hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of understanding that went beyond normal human experience. Behind him came 2 others, a Zilithian female with the characteristic blue-green skin of her species, and a massive Mordak whose tusked features would have been intimidating if not for the gentle expression in his eyes. We felt your approach, Marcus Chen said simply. The connection guided us here. Elena embraced each of the 3 volunteers, and Zeth watched in fascination as their faces lit up with shared joy. He could almost see the emotional connection flowing between them, a bond that transcended species boundaries. These are the test subjects? Zeth asked. Elena nodded. Marcus Chen, Dr. Lyra Zephyros, and warrior poet Grex. The first beings in galactic history to experience true interspecies empathy. As they entered the laboratory, Zeth observed the way the 3 moved in perfect coordination, anticipating each other's needs and responding to unspoken communications. It was remarkable, and slightly unsettling, to witness such complete understanding between different species. The virus is stored in a containment unit in the basement laboratory, Elena explained as they descended. It's designed to be released through the atmospheric processing system that serves the entire colony. Once released, normal wind patterns will spread it globally within 12 hours. The basement laboratory was a marvel of scientific engineering, with equipment that Zeth recognized as being far more advanced than standard Imperial technology. Elena had clearly been developing innovations beyond just the Harmony Protocol. She led them to a sealed containment unit that held a single vial of clear liquid. "This is it," she said softly. "The future of galactic civilization, contained in 50 milliliters of genetically modified retrovirus." Zeth stared at the innocuous-looking fluid. "It's hard to believe something so small could change everything." "The greatest revolutions often begin with the smallest actions," Marcus Chen said. "A single word, a moment of compassion, a choice to show mercy instead of violence." Elena carefully extracted the vial and began connecting it to the atmospheric processing system. As she worked, she explained the safeguards she had built into the virus. "The genetic modifications remain dormant until consciously activated," she said. "People will begin to feel something different, a heightened awareness of others' emotional states, but they can choose whether to embrace it fully or suppress it." "What happens if they choose to suppress it?" Sergeant Cray asked. "They continue living as they always have," Elena replied. "But they'll always know that understanding is possible, that the barriers between species are artificial. Over time, I believe most people will choose connection over isolation." Dr. Lyra Zephyros, the Zalithian volunteer, spoke for the first time since their arrival. "Commander, you should understand what the full activation feels like. It's not telepathy, we don't read minds or lose our individual identity. But we feel each other's joy, pain, fear, and hope as if they were our own." "Does it make violence impossible?" Zeth asked. "Not impossible," Grex the Mordak rumbled, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of deep wisdom. "But violence becomes self-destructive. How can you harm another when their pain becomes your pain?" Elena finished connecting the vial to the atmospheric system. "It's ready. All I have to do is activate the release mechanism, and, within hours, every person on New Terra will carry the genetic modifications." She paused, her hand hovering over the activation control. "Commander, are you certain about this?" "Once we begin, the Empire will stop at nothing to destroy us. They'll hunt us across the galaxy." Zeth thought of his home world, of the farmers who had died rather than submit to Imperial rule. He thought of the countless worlds conquered not for their crimes but for their independence. He thought of Elena's daughter and all the children like her who deserved better than an empire built on fear. "Do it," he said. Elena pressed the activation control. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a soft hum filled the basement laboratory as the atmospheric processing system began distributing the viral vector throughout New Terra's air supply. "How long before we know if it worked?" Zeth asked. "The initial genetic changes take about 6 hours to complete," Marcus Chen answered. "People will begin experiencing enhanced empathy almost immediately, but the full protocol won't be available for activation until the modifications are complete." They made their way back to the surface, where Zeth's team was maintaining a perimeter watch. Specialist Torres approached as they emerged from the building. "Sir, we're receiving urgent communications from Imperial Command. Admiral Thex wants an immediate status report." Zeth nodded grimly. Their time was running out faster than expected. "Tell them we've discovered additional research sites that require investigation. Buy us as much time as you can." As Torres moved away to handle the communication, Elena touched Seth's arm gently. "Commander, I want you to know that whatever happens next, you've already changed everything. Your choice to show mercy, to question orders that felt wrong, that's how real change begins." Zeth looked around at his team, at Elena and her volunteers, at the peaceful colony of New Terra spreading out around them. In a few hours, the viral vector would begin its work. In a few days, it would spread beyond this world to others. In a few months, every inhabited planet in the galaxy would carry the seeds of transformation. The Empire would fight back, of course. They would develop weapons to counter the virus, create propaganda to convince people that empathy was weakness, use every tool at their disposal to maintain their grip on power. But, for the first time in over 1,000 years, they would be fighting against hope instead of despair, against unity instead of division. And, Zeth had learned something important in his years of military service: no empire could survive when the people it oppressed truly understood each other. 6 months later, Commander Zeth Corvin sat in a small cafe on Sanctuary Station, a hidden base established by refugees from across the galaxy. The space station existed in the void between star systems, powered by stolen Imperial technology and defended by ships whose crews had chosen conscience over orders. The transformation had begun exactly as Elena predicted. The Harmony Protocol had spread through commercial shipping lanes, passenger transports, and even military vessels. Imperial attempts to contain it had failed because they couldn't quarantine every planet, station, and ship in the galaxy simultaneously. Now, reports were coming in daily of Imperial units refusing orders, of conquered worlds declaring independence, of ancient enemies laying down their weapons as they finally understood each other's motivations. The Empire was fragmenting, not through violent revolution but through the simple realization that cooperation served everyone better than conflict. Elena approached his table, carrying 2 cups of tea and smiling. She had activated the full protocol 6 months ago, and the change in her was remarkable. She seemed to glow with an inner peace that came from truly understanding the hearts of those around her. "Any word from the Hegemony Council?" Zeth asked as she sat down. "They're formally requesting negotiations," Elena replied. 3 more Imperial sectors declared independence this week. Admiral Thex's fleet suffered massive defections when their crews underwent the protocol and realized they were fighting to preserve oppression rather than order. Zeth shook his head in amazement. "I never imagined it would happen this fast." "When people are given the choice between fear and understanding, most choose understanding," Elena said simply. The Empire maintained control by keeping species isolated, afraid of each other. Once that fear was gone. She didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew that the galaxy was transforming into something unprecedented in recorded history, a civilization based on empathy rather than dominance. "Elena," Zeth said quietly, "do you ever regret it? The decision to change everything?" Elena smiled and reached across the table to take his hand. With the protocol active, Zeth could feel her emotions directly, the deep contentment, the unshakable certainty that they had chosen correctly, and, underneath it all, the fierce love for her daughter and all the children who would grow up in this new galaxy. "Never," she said. "How could I regret helping the galaxy choose love over fear?" Zeth nodded, feeling his own doubts dissolve in the face of her absolute conviction. Around them, the cafe buzzed with quiet conversation as beings from dozens of species planned the future together, their differences no longer barriers but sources of strength. The Empire's reign of terror was ending not with violence but with understanding. And it had all begun with a single choice: to show mercy instead of following orders, to choose compassion over duty. The revolution was complete. The galaxy had chosen peace.